So in conversation with me today is Qaanitha Hunter, one of the youngest editors in our country. Qaanitha is the assistant editor for politics and opinion at News 24. The work that journalists do is often linked to shifting societal violence. It requires the restitching of our social fabric, the slow and soft work at the cold face of our norms of masculinity, the generations of impact, of violence, and of our brutal past. The need for courageous people to stand up. And that is what we see in the work of many of the journalists today, female journalists at the forefront of bringing stories to the understanding and to the awareness of the public so that we can make informed decisions. Time and time again, they have come to the front, they have stood up, and they are challenging the way in which this country is being destroyed. Qaanitha's work, and part of it and much of the focus around her work, is about holding the powerful to account. I would like to welcome Qaanitha to this expert conversation series, which is a part of my research driven through the CMA and the NIHSS. So thank you very much, Qaanitha, for making this time. I know that you fitted us in the midst of a very busy schedule, but it's important for us to get the voice of a diverse perspectives and a great range of women in different professions. Now, you are in the journalism field. You're one of the youngest editors in the country. You have done amazing work in terms of the stories that you have covered. You've written 2 books, very, very pertinent to the South African climate. The first one, of course, being on Ramaphosa, The Balance of Power, Ramaphosa and the Future, and then also the 8 Days in July. I want to start with that. If you can let's begin this conversation with you reminiscing a little bit and sharing for us the very deep, perspectives that drove and motivations that drove your involvement in these 2 books, and why specifically did you go, for these particular issues?
Yeah, so I have been a political reporter in South Africa for the last 12 years or so, my 13th year. And I obviously cover a fleeting amount of stories. I was dedicated to cover President Cyril Ramaphosa in the early part of his career. And so a lot of my reportage went beyond the surface. So it was, what was happening behind the scenes. And I developed a fascination as to why what is happening is happening. And so I obviously spent a lot of time reporting on the political rise of Cyril Ramaphosa as president of the ANC and then president of the Republic, and the downfall of former President Jacob Zuma. And so what I sought to do in my first book, Balance of Power, Ramaphosa and the Future of South Africa, is to give you a narrative as to what happened, but also intertwine it with what laid the foundation for what was happening and what this would mean for the future of the country. And so it's very strange to write a book on a president at the onset of their career, of their presidency rather. But Cyril Ramaphosa had such a interesting history. South Africa was such in a unique place, and the politics was so shifting and unstable at the time that it was important to take a step back and say, okay, what is the moment? How did we get here? And why does it matter? Fast forward a few years, there was the July unrest, where we saw unprecedented violence in a post-democratic South Africa play out in most of KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng and other parts of the country. For me, my focus was not on the physical aspects of the looting or the criminality. My aspect was, why was there failure of the state to do its job, which is to maintain law and order and uphold the constitution? And then came the secondary question, which was this an attempted insurrection? If it was, what was the motive? What was the intersection between politics and the criminality that we saw play out in the streets of South Africa for those 8 days? So I set out very soon after the unrest, which is also an anomaly because usually, these things take time to unfold and then you do the work of gathering information and research. But we set hot off the back of it, myself, my colleague Jeff Wicks, and Kavil Singh, who witnessed a part of the protest in KwaZulu-Natal, to set up to explain what happened, why did it happen, why was it allowed to happen. So those are the three questions we set out in writing the book, 8 Days in July. My focus was on the intelligence sector and the criminal justice sector behind the scenes. We managed to get our hands on a trove of leaked intelligence documents. And suffice to say, we had more documents, we had more insight into what was happening in the security cluster than a panel that was subsequently set up by President Cyril Ramaphosa, led by Professor Sandy Africa, a high panel review that looked into the unrest. And they said, we never had access to these classified documents. It was leaked to us by very brave whistleblowers. And what we did is we pieced together those 8 days. We carved it, we stitched up a brocade, if you like, of what happened during that time.
Now, you raise very important issues, most specifically about the responsibility and the role of citizens to hold the state to account, to question the behavior of the state and perhaps its lack of responses, its lack of attention to detail, its lack of information. And more specifically, in the final comment, I think about the lack of trust, because whistleblowers chose to trust you, the media, and journalists with certain information rather than giving it to somebody within the state. And they usually say that the price good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. And the work that you're doing now is to test that, is to challenge that, to say that we're not going to be indifferent, we're going to question the way in which the state is being run, and the way in which the state is not fulfilling its social compact or its social responsibilities and political duties to the citizens. Now, as a woman journalist, as a woman, a young woman, a Muslim woman, facing these very many challenges in a very difficult society that we find ourselves in as South Africa, are you firstly afraid for yourself if we look at what has happened to people like Babita Deokaran, as you unearth the very many questions that you are asking, especially with relation to or in reference to accountability by the state?
I think fear is a privilege when in this environment, when we all have to speak out and we all have to take action. And you know, I speak to you just moments ago. We were protesting at South African National Editors Forum and other NGOs outside the court, where former President Jacob Zuma is taking a journalist, my colleague Karen Moore, to court, a private prosecution, a malicious private prosecution of her for doing her job, for reporting on the case. So when I say it's a privilege to be in fear, is that my fear I have to transcend my fear, if at all, so that we have to do the important work, which is to hold power accountable. It is not about me, it's not about you. What we sought to do in the July unrest was to give people, ordinary people who were affected by this, you know, bizarre, warlike moment in the country, to give them answers, to say, why was my business looted? Why was my livelihood affected? Why was my house affected? Why was my loved one killed? We were trying to answer those basic questions. And when we come out, it's not, you know, unfortunately, you cannot give one simple question that this one was to blame or that one was to blame, but be able to set out a myriad of reasons, number one, but number two, to set out to sketch an environment under which what happened, to make you understand why was it allowed to happen? Why did the state fail in that moment? What was the correlation between the politics and criminality that we saw? So where we are as South Africans is that the decline of our state, the decline of democracy, is happening on our watch. And so if we, and this is what motivates me, is that if we sit back and watch helplessly, or outsource our solutions to the same politicians who cause our problems in the first place, we are then becoming complicit in the creation of problems. So as a Muslim journalist, as a female journalist, as a young journalist, I am no different to a young Black female woman who is trying to hold her counselor accountable in township in the west of Pretoria, or fighting for equitable access to justice, for example. South Africa's democracy is at a crossroads. It is in a perilous situation because there is a systematic attack on our democracy by people who have been democratically elected to lead this country. And so our role here, me as a journalist, as the fourth estate, but more importantly, as an active citizen, my job here is to say, I will not succumb to the threats. I will not succumb to the intimidation, because what I am fighting for in my corner, if you like, is much bigger, much more, it's bigger than me. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than journalism. It's what I say is country duty.
So now let's just focus in a little bit on the decisions that you have made. You said that, for you it's important. You cannot simply sit back because you notice this as an attack on the democracy, and you're also a young person, so you're representative of the youth in many ways. As an African woman, do you think that your approach to interventions in times of crisis and conflict is therefore influenced by much of your culture, perhaps your upbringing, your socialization? I mean, because this was your intervention. You followed the stories, you followed what was happening, and then you drove right into it to make sure that you uncovered the evidences and you sought answers, something that the state has been very poor in delivering. Till today, we find that there hasn't been an adequate response from the state as to what actually happened and what they have done about it in terms of what they found out. So basically, we have, a closed window from the state, but it is the fourth estate, people like yourself, who are bringing the stories to the fore. I just want to also ask you very quickly with regards, the first one was about you as an African woman and the impact, is it your cultural background, etc. But the second part is, as a woman, and I see that in terms of uncovering these stories and really bringing forth impactful journalism, women are at the fore. Karen, as you say, she's in court today fighting against President Zuma. Yourself, you've written these books and you're also challenging this. If you look at also Paulie van Wyk, she's also another one who's doing deep in investigative journalism. It's women who are uncovering these stories. So in the South African landscape, are you finding that holding truth to account is a stronger, motivation that is being driven by women? And are these women then, what shall I say, the flag bearers of, maintaining the narrative that citizens need to be active and that there is an alternate that is available to us, and that is that we can then start to forge our own understanding of a state and gradually move away from this way, what you described as a very much of a gangster or mafia state?
So, as African women, right, we fight. We have to fight at every part of our lives, and this is not something that we should take pride in. It's the misfortune that we have in that our existence is a rebellion, and we have to constantly fight for to be seen, to be heard, and so fighting against misgovernance, resisting against attempts to subvert the democracy, and even more specifically, fighting against efforts to muzzle the media, for example, like I'm doing today, is part of my DNA. It's something that is intrinsically part of who I am as an African woman. And so the notion of standing up against injustice is ingrained in us as African women, and it's something that I cannot separate myself. It's not something that I've learned. It's not something that I've just walked into and put on as if I'm wearing a garb. This is the fabric of myself and all of my sisters that I've grown up with, right? And so, does society shape the person that I am? Absolutely. the one thing that you can say about South Africa is that we have a healthy dose of resilience found nowhere else, and that's something that we have to wear as African women. Now, moving to the question around female journalists, South Africa has one of the best equality rates when it comes to women in journalism. We have 60% plus female journalists. We are the leaders in the world when it comes to female editors. We've done a great deal to have equality in newsrooms. If you compare with emerging, when we compare ourselves, South Africa, to the rest of the world, so-called first world countries are far behind our levels of newsroom equality, which is an incredible thing. Yes, there are issues around the fact that we have far fewer editors-in-chief females. There's issues around, access. There's issues around, representation of female voices. But if you want to judge South African landscape on a woman numerically, we have done phenomenally well in the last 50 years, and so we reap the benefits of it. And then you see not only women being there for the sake of being there as part of some quota system, we have women leading, front runners, leaders in our field, whether it's in the political reporting space, whether it is in the legal reporting space, whether it's in the investigative reporting space. You've mentioned some of my colleagues. I can mention 100 others who are doing phenomenal work to literally not only be leaders in our respective fields, but be leaders in the industry and effectively in society. Now, the response to the phenomenal work that my colleagues have been doing is disproportionate to that of my male colleagues. I give you an example. I wrote a book, 8 Days in July, with two of my male colleagues, Jeff Weeks and Kabir Singh. The amount of abuse that I received versus what they received is completely disproportionate. I received trolling, online social harassment, stemming from back in the day, from the Zuma eras, when we were uncovering former President Jacob Zuma all the way till today. Karen Moore, the same thing. We're dealing with a phenomenon of online misogyny, of cyber misogyny, where social media harassment has been weaponized, and they found that targeting female journalists is a more effective tool to intimidating the media. So cyber misogyny is not just random anonymous bots, fat shaming me on Twitter or attacking Carol Moore on Twitter, but it's targeted harassment of journalists aimed at creating a chilling effect across the industry, male or female. And so the concept of cyber misogyny is the new letters of intimidation. Before, when I started my career, you were worried because people would follow you. There would be attempts to, to threaten your life. Now there doesn't have to be that level of effort now. All they can do is be sustained attacks on people like myself and people like Karen Moore, people like Polly Van Beek, who dare, venture in the space. And again, the objective is to create that chilling effect, to make other journalists question themselves. So like today, where you have a journalist who's sitting in court, taking on a former president of the Republic, other journalists are sitting back and saying, I don't want that stress in my life. And that's exactly what those in power want. And so there's twofold to it, Qaanitha. The first of it is dealing with it from a media freedom perspective. At the end of the day, the level of harassment that we face is a direct reaction to the gains that we as female journalists have made in uncovering corruption, in holding to account or power to account, and more importantly, to continue doing good and ethical journalism. So there's the one part of it. The other part of it is the human consequence of it, and that is the mental health consequence of it. And that is something I cannot understate in any way. the human consequence of this, of harassment, of the cyber misogyny. And I sit here and I say to you, no, I'm not afraid of my life. But what I cannot say to you is that this is not having an impact on my mental health. I've spoken out endlessly since 2018 about the consequence that my job has had on my mental health. The same with my colleagues, Karen Moore, the same as we deal with this phenomenon of cyber misogyny, of online harassment, of trolling, of bots, of intimidation, of amplified intimidation through the use of social media. And so you cannot speak about what happens to one journalist in isolation. What happens to Paulie happens to Karen, happens to me, happens to other colleagues as well. And so it's all a link. And so if we all, as it often happens, relent to the pressure and say, I cannot, for the sake of my mental health, continue, you are giving the bullies, you are giving into those who want us to cower, to say, you've won. And the point is now that we have to have a parallel focus on our work, on uncovering corruption, unscrupulous behavior, etc., uncovering legal trials and politics and courts and all aspects of the news, but at the same time, to have that support, to have that awareness around mental health, and to have proper interventions in place so that you do not have a phenomenon where a few journalists succeed or do their best, but then get burnt out, deal with mental health issues, and then leave the industry or leave journalism because they cannot cope it.
This is very worrying, because if we acknowledge the situation in which we find ourselves, in most instances, we are caught in a very patriarchal context. So in times of conflict, the context is patriarchal, but also in doing your work, you find yourself caught in a patriarchal context itself that is trying to limit your effect and your ability. And this is something you've now experienced and explained quite fluently and eloquently in this last answer that you have just given us, and the conversation that you've shared with me. So considering these impacts, considering the fact that this patriarchal context is so dominant, do you believe that women can be effective still in addressing the challenges that they find in these very conflicting situations? Because, I mean, women are doing the work out there. They're leading, they're doing the groundwork. And much of the stories in South Africa that has come out as a result of state capture, etc., has come from, particularly from your sector, from the fourth industry, from journalists and whistleblowers trusting you.
So we operate in a patriarchal society, and that patriarchy filters into our environment, the newsroom environment as well. It filters in all spheres of society. We as women, you contend misogyny at home or patriarchy, in your private life, and then you get to your workplace and you contend with it there. You go to the political space, you contend with it there. So that's the sort of broader overarching environment that you're operating. Then just the danger of life as a woman in South Africa. Studies have extensively unpacked the danger of just being a woman in South Africa, the danger on your life, right? And so that to me is that threat continues for people like me, for any other woman who lives and breathes in South Africa. The third thing is women who dare to take on men. And that comes with an added set of attack and challenges. And so the patriarchy that you end up dealing with is multiple. The misogyny is layered, and sort of you encounter it at every step of the way. So if I have to sit back and say, is it worth it? Of course it's worth it, because this is not about me. This is about It's not about a few of us being let into the door and the door being closed, and into the room and the door being closed behind us. It should not be an anomaly that you have a female assistant editor for politics and opinion at News 24. It should not be an anomaly that the best investigative journalists in the country are females. It should be commonplace. And that's where we're heading as South Africans, regardless of the stumbling blocks that we face. And that is something that I set out to achieve. Being the first to do something is not an accomplishment. I don't want to be the first. I don't want to be the first young woman in hijab doing X, Y, and Z. I want it to be a very normal part of society. And the reality of it is, as South Africans, if you track the history of protest in South Africa, even against the apartheid dispensation, women were the bones, women were the muscle of the liberation movement. Yet the men are the ones we celebrate. And so that's not an anomaly then, that now in 2023, it's the women doing the hard work, but it's the women that are getting majority of the abuse. It's a consistency of, it's a microcosm of the problems in our society and how little progress we've made on that front. So for me, I sit back and I say, the fact that my sisters are the ones that are combating corruption at the forefront of exposing wrongdoing, it is a huge, huge feat to celebrate. But at the same time, we should not celebrate the fact that that we have to do what we do against all of these odds stacked against us.
No, that is certainly something that I think right across the board, civil society needs to consider these issues and ask, what are we doing in terms of contributing in the way that which female journalists are contributing in this country? So leading on to that then, from your research that you did for the July unrest, do you believe that social partners such as business, NGOs, and civil society groups should play an active role in holding the state accountable and, where possible, drive alternate approaches to governance in order to nurture a more participatory democratic process? Because as we see, representative democracy is not serving us well at all.
Representative democracy is not serving us well. But the biggest lesson that I learned from the July unrest is, why would you outsource the solution? Why would you think the people who caused July to happen would fix it, A, and B, prevent it from happening again? It was a failure of the state. That was what July effectively was. Yet what you saw was communities saying, where's government? Government caused this. Whether it was the fractures of society in relation to the fact that we have not progressed beyond apartheid spatial planning, and that's why you saw communities who live side by side fighting, literally turning on each other. Whether it was the fact that communities could be easily baited into racial, just so the conflict was racialized. The fact that it was so easy to mobilize communities where there was not even a single ringleader or a political cause, that it was organized crime was able to just completely take over what probably started off as legitimate protests, right? And so, can you just remind me of your question, so that I'm guided?
Yes, it's about the role. Do you believe that social partners such as business, NGOs,
sure.
and civil society? Yes.
So the point is that to effectively what happened that quelled the unrest in July, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, but elsewhere in the country, was that society, which is made up of your community policing forums, your your civil society organizations, business chambers came together and said, okay, the state is not doing their job. So we're going to take things in our hands. We're going to provide security where necessary. We're going to provide the outreach where necessary. We also saw this manifest itself in the COVID-19 pandemic. I was in a panel with big business and the SARS commissioner, Ed Kisbetter. And I said to them, the danger where we are now, right, as society, is that NGOs, civil society, and big business have realized that government is just not doing what they need to do, whether it's local government, provincial government, national government, right?
Mm-hmm.
So before, we used to stand on the outside and shout at the government. Now what we're doing is we are doing the homework of the state. We literally just stepping in and filling the potholes and making sure the street lights, because instead of forcing the government's hand to deliver what it is able to do. And so I think where we are 30 years into this democratic project that we are as South Africans is we have to rethink what active citizenry looks like. We have to rethink what is our role as ordinary South Africans. What is our role as the different formations, whether it's me as the media, whether it's you as NGOs, whether it is activists, whether it's just ordinary people going about their business. What part do I play in allowing bad politics to ruin the future of our country? And so there's a question around complicity that we need to start talking about. Am I being complicit in the decline of the state by sitting back and allowing the status quo to remain? To allow a municipality like KwaZulu-Natal to literally kill an entire tourism sector, for example. Similarly, to allow bad politics in the form of unstable coalitions to ruin an economic hub of the continent in the form of Johannesburg. Mm. And so I think the questions that we have to ask ourselves in 2023 is a bit different to what we asked ourselves maybe 10 or 20 years ago. This representative democracy has given us, for 30 years, we have kind of a framework of which it served us. Now, we have to ask the question to say, A, is it helping us? B, why are we allowing our attacks on this constitutional democracy or this infringement on the constitutional democracy to persist? And what would that mean if continued unabated for the next 10 years, for the next 20 years, and in fact, for the next 30 years? And so what my reporting has fueled in me is the need for us to go beyond ourselves. And so the questions around, capital flight, about mass immigrations of skills to other countries, all of that should not matter at this point, where COVID-19, the July unrest, and now this economic situation that we are in as a country has to teach us a lesson that politics is not going to fix this. Our bad politics. Let's put that right. And so we have to reframe what life as a South African looks like. Is that we have to go back to an era where this is not about me and my family, but it's about who we are as communities. I don't have the answers as to what does that look like, and I don't presume that we should all play in the political space. What I say is that the decline of this democracy was very was hard fought. This democracy, the price of this democracy was very high, and so the decline should not be taken lightly. And the attacks on it in the different manifestations is something we should really be cautious against. Today, it's taking a journalist to maliciously privately prosecute a journalist. Tomorrow, it is vigilantism, of epic proportions, or the failure of the state to protect livelihoods of people. At the end of the day, this all has a profound impact on our lives and our livelihoods.
You have unpacked a tremendous amount of issues, and most specifically, I think what I want to hone in on is also the whole notion of complicity. But we're fast running out of time, and I want to know from you, what values do you think need to be reinvigorated in citizens and the public at large? And how do you, as a woman journalist, foster social cohesion and contribute to peace building? Because, the stories that you bring to the fore usually is about very conflict-ridden situations. It's conflicting in that it affects the lives of citizens all the time. It raises issues about violence, because state capture is violence, lack of service delivery is violence, those kind of things. So, but at the same time, when you're writing this, are you conscious that what you're doing in a way, by exposing this, by holding the state to account, by forcing people to be ethical in the way in which they represent each other or themselves, all of this is a way of building social cohesion ultimately, as people come together to work together and start to recognize that we need to shift from a sense of mediocrity and not fall into the trap of being like them, but that we can do better and we need to be better.
So we're in a very difficult place as society, because there's so many things wrong. There's so much of conflict. There's so much of violence. There's so much of people are living what we write about every day. They're living the consequence of it. And so there's a phenomenon of news avoidance that has crept in, right? Where people just are tired of hearing about yet another corrupt politician, yet another organized hit, yet another manifestation of service delivery failures, right? And so that's what concerns me, is that the violence that we see as society, the fractures, the seismic cracks that we feel and live as society is creating a level of apathy. Apathy in multiple manifestations. One is that people are just not turning out to participate in democracy with the lack of voting. Two, just people tuning out of the news because why bother? And three, a lack of active citizenry, because what is my action going to do to, the problems are so big and so vast. So, who am I as a small fish in this big sea, right? So that concerns me. That concerns me, but also fuels fuels why I wake up in the morning. And so this is not particularly around the media, because the media, I don't believe, is the only part of society that's holding up this democracy. I think there are small community organizations that are, fighting for services in Ditsibotla, or whether it is NGOs taking a government to court for President Ramaphosa to do his basic job, like appoint an SABC board, for example, or other activist groupings trying to force reform at the power utility ESCOM. The thing is, our problems are multifold, and so the solutions to the problem have to be plenty. And so there's not one way in which we are going to fix all of this. And it's not going to be easy. And it's not going to be, it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be a clear cut. And so when you talk about, my role in terms of, really the violent society that we exist in, I think that that waking up every day and leading a team of political reporters as an African woman is an act of resistance that I have to continue. And again, like I said, make it such that I am not the only person doing this, that I open the door wide enough that all of us young women can fill in and take their roles in whichever, whether it's in engineering, in mining, in business, in academia, that the door is open for everyone else. The reality of it is that we should not be fighting the battles our parents and your generation fought. We shouldn't be. We should be reaping the benefits of that. The fact that there is a deliberate effort to reverse the gains made in 30 years is not only worrying, but it's heartbreaking. And so, if anything, it's a generational challenge to youth, my peers, but also it is for me the greatest message that I can give anyone is that apathy is going to be our biggest failure as a society. And so waking up, and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but promoting change in a violent society is not one that says, guys, let's be politically active. This is not about politics, as it is about life. It's about society. Being vested in the constitutional democracy that we have should be part of the DNA of what it is to be South African. And so in that constitutional democracy, Section 16 of the Constitution empowers me as a journalist to do my job. And so any attack on that, and I say this to my colleagues often, I say, what we do is a constitutionally derived mandate. We are empowered by the most sacrosanct book in our country, the basis of this democracy, the Constitution, to do what we are doing. And so we cannot undermine that, A, and B, we never take it lightly. And that is what shifts me, that's what guides me in doing what I do, but also in supporting and appreciating what other people are doing in trying to hold up this constitutional democracy and to resist any effort to subvert it.
So I'm going to catch you here now, just off the cuff, very quickly. As a parting comment, what do you think is missing the most, or what is needed the most in our society to take South Africa forward, to build social cohesion, to develop stronger ethics amongst the generation that's coming, and of course those who will ultimately hold the rulers to account, because the youth constitute a significant percentage of the electorate, and if they come out and if they start to vote, this will make a huge difference. What, 2 or 3 things? Is it trust? Is it generosity? Is it education? What do you think are the most important qualities that are needed in our society? Because you meet people every single day and your pulse is on the ground. You know what is needed and what people are looking for.
I sound like a struck record, but active citizenry is it. Active citizenry looks like I am a university graduate. We have a huge crisis in society, in my community, with kids unable to read for meaning as a result of government failures or as a result of legacy of apartheid or whatever it may be, a result of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. What can I do to deal with that small little challenge of kids who can't read for meaning? What can I do to deal with the scourge of crime in my community? What can I do to assist with? What can I do to assist with a real situation where we have a huge dropout rate in grades 8 to 10, school dropouts. What can I do to hold politicians accountable in my local municipality? What can I do to, using my prowess as a successful business person or as a successful architect, or to play a role in foster great, good community values, right? So where we are now is our interaction with democracy cannot only be voting. It has to be voting, and that's a huge issue you've raised. Is that apathy is going to be the thing that accelerates our decline as a constitutional democracy and hasten our destination as a failed state. And so, everybody has to vote. That's the bare minimum of our interaction with constitutional democracy. B, we have to realize as society that why do we want to be part of this rules-based constitutional democracy, and what's the responsibility that it comes with, right? So it comes with a lot of rights, but it comes with a lot of responsibility. And then the third thing is, what role can I play? And so when I say active citizenry, what is the thing that needs to be done? Is that active citizenry means a myriad of things. It means getting people to vote. It means participation in your local political sphere, participation in society. It means people taking responsibility and taking a role beyond themselves. So that is tax compliance. It could mean generosity in the form of, assisting a huge crisis of poverty in this country. It could mean, coming together and working as a society to deal with issues around herd latrines. And so again, I make the point that we cannot do the homework of government, right? But what we can do is that we can create a scenario where we all agree that this is not where we want to be as society. And excuse me, we have to agree that this is not where we want to be as society, and play these micro roles in that change that we want to be. Again, it's a cliche, be the change you want to see. But again, it's not about macro change. I, as Qaanitha Hunter, am not going to change the world. You, as Quraysh Councilman, is not going to change the world. What we can do is we can make micro advancements in little areas that we operate in, that we work in, and in areas that we live in. And so if we all do that, you're changing the landscape in some way or the other. Again, we have a blueprint of how this works based on our fight against apartheid, and that was even before I was born. We have that blueprint. It worked then. Why not be let's not try to reinvent the wheel in many ways, but just try to learn the lessons of what brought us this constitutional democracy, and see what has happened to create this regression, or the sense of regression that exists today. And so again, what must be done? Well, each and every one of us have to decide for themselves what it is that's important to them, and we have to do something. So something has to be done. As to what is that something, it should be the personal agency. And I often quote the words of former Deputy Chief Justice Dikhan Moseneke, is to say, we each have to be our own liberators. That was a principle in the fight against apartheid and for democracy, and this is going to have to be the mantra as we cling on to this constitutional democracy that was so hard fought for.
And I cannot agree with you more. Certainly, we each need to be our own liberators to create the space for ourselves and for all people to inhabit their full humanity. So thank you very much for spending this time with me, Qaanitah, and for sharing these powerful thoughts, which I'm sure are going to create much conversation amongst the youth as they determine for themselves the role that they have to play in bringing about social cohesion and consolidating the democracy that is right now, a point of, I think, a scary point in the lives of many South Africans. As you say, it's fast unraveling, and it's being a very contested, situation. We hope that we can get beyond this and build a society where there is ethics, there are the values that you speak about in terms of active citizenry, and where people come together and realize that they are far stronger than the state actually is. So once again, thank you, Qaanitah.
Thank you very much. More importantly, it's forums like these, it's discussions like these that are the first step in creating the awareness of what me and you and everyone ought to be doing to create that better future for our country and for ourselves.
Certainly it is. And I wish you all the success and wish Karen success in the court case that she is embroiled in right now. Ultimately, her success is the success of the citizens of South Africa, where we then actually do play that role, where we hold the powerful to account, where we hold evil to account.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.